that will be followed up with the staff. So thank you very much. Mr. Hurd, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I apologize if I review some information that has already been discussed in this hearing, but raise your hand. This is for all 5 of y'all. Raise your hand if you're responsible for FAFSA.gov. All right, let the record reflect. Mr. Runcie, Mr. Gray, and Ms. Garza raise their hand. Raise your hand if you're responsible for the DRT tool, or also known as the FSA-D tool. All right, let the record reflect. Ms. Garza and Mr. Corbin raises their hand. In October 25, 2016, IRS conducted an e-authentication risk assessment, and it concluded that the DRT tool was in need of stronger authentication measures. Is that correct, Ms. Garza?
Yes, it is, sir.
And were steps taken to improve the authentication measures?
We started to work with the Department of Ed.
You started to work with the Department of Ed. What steps, what did you actually do since October 25, 2016 to strengthen the DRT tool?
We increased monitoring on that application so that we could become alerted should we see something suspicious.
Were those efforts successful?
In January, it was those efforts that identified that there was suspicious activity occurring, and at that time we partnered with the Department of Ed to get our 2 cyber teams together to review that suspicious activity, and we were informed by the Department of Ed that that was it was normal behavior.
What steps are being taken now to strengthen the authentication of DRT?
We have already developed and implemented an encryption solution on the IRS side. We are working with the Department of Ed.
How is encryption going to help with authentication if you have a user that has stolen credentials?
The authentication solution that we had looked at was not satisfactory to provide the usability of the application, so we have moved to an encryption. So unless that...
But that doesn't answer the question. The question is, how does encryption on the back end help with authentication of an attacker that is using stolen credentials?
It does not improve authentication. What it does do is does not allow the data to be revealed to someone other than the actual applicant.
But if you have stolen credentials and you're not able, then you're able to spoof that you have the credentials. What are you doing to prevent that from happening?
There are a set of keys that on the IRS is only shared with the Department of Education. Okay. So as the applicant comes in and tells us to release the data to the Department of Education, they don't have access. They don't have the key to de-encrypt that data. It's only the Department of Education, once it gets to their side, that they will be able to de-encrypt the data.
Okay.
So that applicant...
So, Mr. Gray, how you're responsible for FAFSA.gov?
Yes, sir.
What are you doing to strengthen authentication if somebody has stolen credentials to actually authenticate it to the end user?
We are looking at several proactive measures to...
We are looking, portends that you're doing something in the future. Do you have a past tense verb that you can use on what you have done?
For the department, we follow Defense in Depth, and we have a whole series of actions that we're taking to ensure that we protect our systems.
And what are those series of actions?
Some of them I referenced in my opening statement regarding data loss prevention, web access firewalls.
So how does data loss prevention help with authentication?
It would not. For authentication for FAFSA, this is the balance between, this is an application form where users are actually inputting their own data to gain access to apply for a student loan.
Yeah, I get that. And so, it's your responsibility, right, to confirm yes. that the person that's entering that data is indeed the person who owns that data. And I recognize this is a tough job. Okay, I recognize that what you have to do is difficult, but you still haven't explained to me. We've proven and we've seen with the theft of over 100,000, or the impact on 100,000 students that the authentication mechanism within FAFSA.gov and the DRT tool is lacking. And my concern is that everybody's doing this. And I want to know, what are you doing? And if there's not if you need additional authorities to improve authentication on FAFSA.gov, I want to hear that too.
Thank you. The authorities that I have through FATARA has been very adequate. In terms of what we're doing, this is the balance between accessibility of the tool, which at this point it is a web application where students and prospective borrowers are coming in to apply. The level of authentication for that is currently set where it is so that we can cast the net as broadly as we can to potential borrowers. The identity proofing piece comes in when we are dispersing the funds. For the DRT, the challenge or what we're doing is, or looking at doing, is masking and encrypting the data so that if an identity thief logs in through our system, they will not see that data, which would not allow them to exploit this vulnerability.
Madam Chairwoman, I apologize for going over my time.
No problem. Without objection, I'm going to recognize Mr. Duncan for a unanimous consent request.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I realize you're not going to be able to get to me for questions, and so I simply want to make a unanimous consent request to include in the record at this point an email from one of my constituents, Melissa Macco, who is the financial aid administrator at the Tennessee College of Applied Technology, because she has 4 good suggestions to help with this problem in her email. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Kelly, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In recent years, hacking, identity theft, and cyber crimes have been on the rise. I've been the victim myself. Federal agencies have to do their part to secure their systems, but Congress must acknowledge the impact its own actions have had on the ability of agencies to protect their IT systems. Many agencies face serious challenges in modernizing outdated legacy IT systems and implementing stronger cybersecurity measures under the severe budget cuts that have been imposed by Republican-controlled Congresses. One of the agencies hit hardest by these cuts is the IRS. In May 2016, the IRS then Chief Information Officer Terrence Mulholland testified, and I quote, "The IRS budget system is the most critical challenge facing IT modernization." Mr. Corbin and Ms. Garza, what are the impacts of budget cuts on the ability of the IRS to modernize and secure IT systems? Are we putting taxpayers at greater risk?
So, Congresswoman, one of the things that Congress did do for us last year was appropriate the additional $290 million. We did take a portion of that funding to help us get the tools that Ms. Garza had described to help us identify and monitor our systems more closely. We also continue to invest in the Return Review Program, or RRP, and so that allows us to create rules and filters so that as returns come in, we're able to evaluate those returns and then for potential fraud or identity theft, and then stop those returns before they are actually paid out.
So I think it's on. I want to thank Congress for the money that we did receive. That was extremely beneficial. It allowed us to put new technologies in place that are actually protecting our systems at a much higher level than we had done in the past. In this incident itself, we were able to address the situation a lot quicker than we would have been able to in the past because of the new monitoring capability and the data analytics capabilities that we were implemented using those resources.
Mm-hmm. And would you say more is needed?
We would always be thankful for any additional resources or continued support in this area.
To make us more secure?
Yes.
Okay. It is not just IT systems that have been affected by these resource lapses. Mr. Mulholland testified last year that increased progress on systems modernization and cybersecurity measures, and I quote, will require significant sustained additional resources in the IT area. Do you agree with that assessment?
I would agree with Mr. Mulholland's assessment of our needs.
Mr. Corbin?
Yes, ma'am, I would agree as well.
Okay. Yet again, Congress has failed to ensure that agencies have the resources they need to carry out their missions. For instance, under the IRS Restructuring and Reform Act of 1998, Congress gained IRS the authority to hire a limited number of individuals to staff critical technical and professional positions at salary levels greater than general schedule rates. This critical pay authority was intended to help the agency attract highly qualified individuals with advanced technical expertise who might otherwise be available for government service at normal federal salary levels. The IRS used this authority to fill 168 of these positions from 1998 to 2013. Does critical pay play a role in making federal government jobs more appealing to highly qualified technical individuals who may be interested in public service but could be earning a much higher salary in the private sector?
Congresswoman, the streamlined critical pay authority that we had was extremely beneficial to the IRS. Because of that authority, we were able to bring on board high-level architects, engineers, and cybersecurity experts. Over the last several years, they have helped us ensure that we were doing what was needed to secure our perimeter and make sure that our systems were running much better. The important component of this was the streamlined part of the critical pay. It allowed us to offer a job when we found somebody after the announcement was made and we identified somebody much quicker than the normal process would have been. A lot of times what we found was without the streamlined component, when we got back to the individual to see if they were still interested, the time had elapsed so long that we were not able or they were no longer available or willing to come to work for us. So it is a critical component.
But this pay authority expired in 2013 and has not been reauthorized. So American taxpayers lose when Congress ignores its responsibilities. Congress can and should swiftly pass streamlined critical pay reauthorization and act to provide adequate resource levels for cybersecurity at all agencies. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.